Mark walked away from the store, heading around the corner and up Maple Street toward Mia's house. The neighborhood felt welcoming, with its old houses and trees that reached high into the sky. Mark enjoyed visiting Mia. Even though he knew she used him, he didn't mind. Just being around her was enough. Mia was probably the most beautiful girl he'd ever met, and he had also come to enjoy spending time with her Aunt Laura. Laura, too, was beautiful. Mark had liked her ever since he first met her at Oceanside Junior College during registration earlier in the year. While waiting in line, Mark had already made friends with Mia, who had just moved to the area and lived with her aunt. Mia had tapped Mark on the shoulder from behind and asked, "Excuse me, do you know where the girls' bathroom is?" She had mistaken him for a girl. When Mark turned around, Mia quickly realized her mistake. People behind them laughed, and with a bright smile, Mia apologized. Mark, charmed by her beauty, was happy to accept. The conversation eventually shifted to their shared interest in hair care, as both had long, straight hair. Mia discovered that Mark knew quite a lot about keeping hair healthy, even more than some of her female friends. Mia explained the awkward meeting to him, sharing that her aunt ran a beauty shop from home. Mark met Laura when she picked up Mia after registration. The first thing Laura said to him was, "Hey, nice hair." Mia had told Mark that her aunt was a hairdresser, and over time, he and Mia grew close. Mia seemed to always need him for something, whether it was for advice or simply someone to talk to. Now, with finals behind him, Mark was planning to help Mia with her last-minute preparations for the big spring ball and spring break. Mark rang the doorbell at Mia's house. After a moment, Laura opened the door. "Well, hello, Mark. What brings you here?" she asked warmly. "I just stopped by to help Mia today." "Is she home?" Mark asked. "She's not here right now, but she'll be back soon. She tricked you into helping her with her housework again, didn't she?" Laura smiled knowingly. "I finished my finals early, so it's no big deal. Mia is always so busy," Mark said. Laura, still as graceful as ever in her 40s, walked down the stairs in her high heels. Mark glanced over at the nail polish table and leaned in closer to look at the colors. Laura noticed his curiosity and grinned. "Pick one if you'd like." "No, thanks," Mark replied, embarrassed as he turned away. He then looked at the portraits on the wall of women with stunning hairstyles, catching his eye on one in particular, a woman with wild, untamed red curls. After a moment, Mark moved his attention to a rack of evening dresses on the wall, noticing a stack of showboxes beneath. As he continued scanning the room, he saw a woman whose hair Laura was styling. She smiled at Mark, and he thought she looked familiar but couldn't place her face. "Sorry, Mark," Laura said, noticing his gaze. "This is Kay." Kay, a small-framed woman with long hair, waved at him. "Hi, Mark. Are you here to get your hair done for the ball? Laura did your hair, right?" "No, I haven't let Laura touch my hair yet, but I've offered," Mark said with a small smile. "Yeah, but I only said no because I want it to be longer," Mark replied, flipping his hair back over his shoulders in a somewhat exaggerated way. Grace looked at him and said, "Good God, how much longer do you need it? Your hair is already longer than anyone else's in my shop. You really should think about letting Laura do something with it. These days, shorter, curly styles are way more popular. Take this one, for example," she teased, pointing to a picture of a short cut with loose, pretty curls falling down the back. Mark responded, "But my hair isn't curly." "Exactly," Grace said. "That's why you need Laura. She can fix that with a perm." She pointed to her own hair as Laura finished taking out the last perm rod. Mark was at a loss for words, unsure of what to say. Grace continued, "But I'm sure you already knew that. Maybe you just like it long so you can style it like this one." She pointed to another picture, showing a woman with big curls pulled back and loosely pinned at the top of her head for a soft look. "Stand up and let me see how long your hair is," she said. Mark thought it was an odd request but stood up as she asked, letting his hair hang well below his shoulders. Turn around so I can see your back, Grace added. Mark did as instructed, spinning around so quickly that he lost his balance. His long hair flew up, covering his face, making it seem like he had spun in a pirouette. Once he regained his balance, he gently pushed his hair behind his shoulders. Both women laughed as Mark, slightly embarrassed, adjusted his hair. You need to work on your spin moves, Grace teased. You wouldn't want to do that on a dance floor. Some waves in your hair would look good, though. You should consider it, she added. I'll think about it, Mark said, hoping to end the teasing. Laura, still smoothing Grace's curls, asked, Really? Are you finally going to set up a meeting with Laura for a perm? I said I'd think about it, Mark muttered, trying to change the subject. Laura smiled, enjoying the playful teasing. Seeing that Mark was getting uncomfortable, she decided to step in. By the way, Mark, Grace owns a dress shop called Formalities. What kind of shop is that? Mark asked, relieved to shift the conversation. He tried not to reveal that he already knew about the shop when he heard its name. He'd been there before when Grace brought over dresses and shoes for MIA to try on for the Starlight Ball. You might be able to help her pick something out, Grace added. Are you going to the ball next week? Mark hesitated. Not really. What do you mean by that? Grace asked, puzzled. You don't have a date, do you? She asked, suddenly realizing. Oh, sorry. Mark shrugged. It's not a big deal. I don't mind living vicariously through MIA. Both women exchanged a look, sensing there was something more in his response. Grace then recognized Mark as the young guy she had seen admiring the dresses in her shop. Just then, Laura's phone rang. Oh, hi, MIA, she said, picking it up. I think there was an accident on the freeway near the mall. She's stuck there until the traffic clears up. She asked if you could wait and help her pick out a dress and shoes, if that's Grace with you, Mark. I guess so, Mark replied. I don't have any other plans. Grace gave him a playful wink. Great. I knew you'd be up for it. No, I don't, Mark replied. That's a great idea though. What do you think, Mark? There's no better time than now to pick out some clothes while we wait. MIA, can you hand me some of those magazines on the table? Laura asked. These are all prom magazines, she teased, emphasizing the word prom. That's fine. I saw some cute outfits for both men and women, Mark said. I'm sure we can find something that works for me. Mark listened in horror as the two women quickly flipped through the pages. For you? He asked, hesitantly. Yes, of course, silly, Laura replied. You and MIA are about the same size. We just need to figure out the right sizes. Mark wasn't sure, but he felt powerless to stop them. The two women began comparing options with a smile. Here we go, Laura finally said, turning the magazine to show Mark and Grace a picture of a young woman with shoulder-length dark auburn hair styled in a curly, shaggy cut. Is that going to be me? Mark asked. Yes, Grace replied with a grin, taking Mark's hand and leading him to the sink. Laura joined them, telling Mark to sit down and putting a smock on him. She gently leaned him back and started washing his hair with a shampoo that smelled good. Grace suddenly smiled and said, I'll be back later, Laura, as she reached for her purse. I just remembered a few other dresses and things I should bring over, given how things have turned out. Laura paused, then smiled. Yes, things could take an interesting turn, she thought to herself, remembering she had told Grace about Mark months ago. Thanks for watching. If you want early access to the next parts, check out Patreon. If not, it'll be online in a couple of days. Laura recalled telling Grace about Mia's new friend, Mark. She had thought Mark seemed a little too feminine. Laura wondered if Mark secretly wanted to dress as a girl, but Grace hadn't been sure since she hadn't met him. Laura had noticed that Mark acted and looked more like a girl than most guys. He spent more time with MIA than his other guy friends, and he played with his long hair in a way that seemed more feminine. He didn't seem any bigger than a typical girl his age. In fact, his eyelashes were longer, and his hands smaller than most girls. He was also quiet, always doing whatever Mia asked, even helping with her housework while she pretended she couldn't do it herself. Laura thought Mark seemed delicate and had started to wonder if Grace had noticed the same thing as soon as she met him. Laura chuckled to herself, wondering what Grace had planned with the things she was going to bring over. Knowing how sneaky Grace could be, Laura had her suspicions. As she led Mark from the sink to the styling chair, Laura said, "It's time to get started. Before I cut your hair, we'll perm it. It'll take a few hours, so please be patient. Here are some magazines to keep you entertained." Mark looked through the magazines and saw they were all women's magazines. "You know, it's what most women read," Laura said. "I know, it's Grace." "They'll do," Mark replied, crossing his skinny legs and flipping through a fashion magazine. The pages were filled with ads for lipsticks, hair products, and hairstyles. There were also articles about hairstyles, dresses, diets, and tips. "You have to sit here while the perm solution hardens," Laura said as she poured herself a cup of coffee. She sat down and asked, "Would you mind if I try something on you? I'd like to practice with a few things. A lot of my clients have asked for them, and I could use some practice before trying them out on my clients," Laura said, trying not to smile. Mark shifted in his chair, already feeling exposed with his head full of perm rods. "I don't know about that," he hesitated. "Oh, please," Laura urged. "It'll be so helpful, and no one will ever know." "There's no need to tell anyone." Mark sighed, giving in. "I guess it's Grace." "Great. It'll be fun, you'll see," Laura said, clapping her hands. Mark squirmed nervously, wondering what he was getting into. He felt self-conscious with his wide eyes and curled hair, but Laura worked quickly and skillfully. She applied a little concealer under his eyes, 2 coats of mascara, black eyeliner, and blended 2 shades of eyeshadow. Laura applied a facial lotion and foundation, giving Mark a light dusting of Shine Control loose powder and finishing with a touch of pink blush. She thinned and shaped his eyebrows slightly, creating a gentle arch, which she said was an important part of the process. Once she was done with his face, Grace picked out a deep red lipstick and carefully applied it to Mark's lips. Stepping back, she surveyed her work. "I kind of like this makeup," Laura said. "It goes on well without asking." Without a word, she then took Mark's left hand and started doing his nails. Mark's eyes widened, and he thought about pulling his hand back to protest, but something told him it wouldn't do any good. He stayed still, nervous, as Laura reshaped his nails and painted them a deep red to match his lipstick. "I guess you're going to tell me this is also a new polish you wanted to try out?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Wow, you catch on quick," Laura laughed. After putting the last coat on the last finger, she said, "There. That's better. Now sit still so they can dry, and I'll get back to your hair." She began carefully removing each perm rod, letting the long strands of hair gently bounce down. As she unwound the hair, she prepared to create his new style by checking the latest hairstyle in a magazine. With comb and scissors in hand, she began cutting away at the curls, pleased with her decision to go for a more feminine version of the shag style she had shown Mark earlier. The style was definitely more feminine than unisex. As the weight of the extra wet hair was trimmed away, the curls began to stand up more. Once the trimming was finished, Laura brushed and fluffed Mark's hair so that it stood away from his face, leaving pretty bangs in the front, which she carefully placed. Mark nervously watched Laura as she moved around to stand in front of him. "Something's still not quite right," she said, hand on her hip, stroking her chin. Mark had no idea what she meant or what he looked like. The smells of perm solution, nail polish, and Laura's perfume made his mind wander. He felt so different. Laura suddenly leaned in, pushing Mark's hair away from one ear. "Got it," she said with a grin. She bent down and grabbed a silver earring gun from the counter. As Mark sat, his hand still outstretched to let the nail polish dry, Laura quickly pulled his hair back out of the way and made a hole in his earlobe. "Hey!" Mark yelled, startled, and snapped back to reality. "Oh, hush," Laura teased. "We can't give you a real makeover without earrings. Can we? Laughing at Mark, she walked to her display of earrings and chose a pair of big hoops. She quickly put them in his ears. Now, let's finish your hair, Laura said, trying not to laugh. Just as she was framing Mark's hair around his face and letting the curls fall gently to his shoulders, Grace came back to the salon. Laura had used a blow dryer to set the curls with cool air and a lot of fluffing. Wow, Grace said, her eyes wide when she saw Mark sitting in the chair. Mark still hadn't seen himself, and he felt a little relieved by Grace's reaction, but also worried because he had forgotten she was coming back. Someone else had seen him now. With a big smile, Grace said, "Honey, I hope I know your dress size." Mark looked surprised. "What? Hey, there's no reason to stop here. It looks like you're ready to see how you'd look in one of my gowns," Grace teased. Mark froze, mesmerized by her words as she turned the chair around so he could finally see himself in the mirror. "You can't wear guy clothes looking like that," Grace laughed. Mark gasped in shock when he saw his reflection. "Oh my God! What have you done? I look like a girl," he exclaimed, his hand going to his mouth in disbelief. He stared at his nails in awe. "Well, of course, that was the general idea, right?" Laura said with a grin. Mark was still trying to process everything. "What do you mean? I thought you were just cutting my hair and trying out some makeup." Laura chuckled. "You didn't know what I was doing? Is that why your eyes kept going to the prom dresses over there?" "We were just trying to help you have some fun," Grace added. "I'm sorry," Mark said weakly. "Of course, I kind of knew what was going on, but I didn't realize it would lead to all this." "What should I do now?" Grace smiled knowingly. "You may not have known, but I bet you hoped." Mark looked down, admitting, "I guess so." "That's better. You might as well be honest with yourself." "It'll be much better if you are," Grace said. "Well, let's get you out of that chair and into something pretty," she continued. "I brought over a lot of lovely things." "Like what?" Mark asked. "You know, things like undies, camisoles, stockings, everything you need before putting on a dress and heels." "Unless you're already set," Grace teased with a playful wink. "No, of course not," Mark said, his voice quiet. "Well, then hurry up," Grace told him. Mark stood up and walked in front of Grace, who was surprised to see that he didn't appear any taller than she was. Grace stood at 5 feet 8 inches, and Mark seemed to be about the same height. She took another look at him and smiled. He looked so girlish in his plain tank top and shorts, and his arms and legs had no visible muscle tone. "Or maybe we should change your name a little for today," she mused. "What about Marcy?" she suggested. "Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?" "Marcy. If you insist," Mark said, his eyes cast down. Laura smiled, pleased with the new name. "Marcy, let's go upstairs and get you a bath. But before you get in, you should put your hair up. We don't want it getting wet. Then, use this cream on your body hair, and after that, take a bath. Spend about 20 minutes in the water, it has oils to smooth your skin. When you're done, put this robe on." "Got it," Mark said slowly, then headed up the stairs. Thanks for watching. If you want early access to the other parts, check out Patreon. Otherwise, it'll be online in a couple of days. Once Mark was gone, the two women burst into laughter. Moments later, they heard the sound of the water running in the tub. "I have to admit, Laura, you were right about him," Grace said. "You did a fantastic job with his hair and makeup. He looks so handsome." "I thought you finally agreed with what I had been thinking about him," Laura replied. "When I realized you figured it out too, I couldn't help myself. I had to give him a full makeover. It was so much fun." "What about MIA? What's she going to say?" Grace asked. "I don't know," Laura said thoughtfully. "I don't think she'll be totally against it, but I guess we'll find out soon enough." The women laughed again before hearing the water stop. "Time to get back to work," Laura said, and the two of them headed upstairs to pick out clothes for Mark to try on. In the guest room, Mark found several outfits laid out on the bed. "Try on some pants first," Grace instructed. When you find some that fit, let me know. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, slipping on a pair of black pants with a floral lace trim. After making sure they fit well, he reached for the matching bustier. Grace grabbed a pretty silk camisole, and Mark carefully slipped it over his arms, smoothing it around his tiny waist. Grace then picked out a few dresses, laying them on the bed. "Oh Grace, honey, it's your choice." Mark's eyes were wide as he picked a lavender dress with a layered skirt and a bodice with straps. The front of the skirt was cut just above the knee, while the back angled down to almost the calf. Grace zipped it up in the back and placed the matching 3-inch heels in front of him. Mark slipped his foot into the shoes. Laura then fussed with Mark's hair, picking out the curls and fluffing them up with a pick as she sprayed them. Afterward, she put a little perfume behind each ear. Grace and Laura stood back, amazed by how he looked. "He looks like he's ready for prom," Grace said, a grin on her face. "I think this dress will work fine," Grace continued, instructing Mark to stand on a stool so she could check the fit. She adjusted the dress, and Mark stood there obediently. Suddenly, the door burst open. "Hey, I thought I was the one getting fitted today," Mia exclaimed, rushing into the room. She stopped short when she saw Mark, standing there in the dress. "Well?" Mia asked, glancing at Grace and Laura. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" Laura and Grace laughed together. "It's your best friend, Marcy," Laura said, emphasizing the first part of the name to give Mia a clue. Mia's jaw dropped. "You really like that?" Mark answered in a soft voice, yes, though he was nervous. Mia grinned before bursting out laughing. "My God," she said with a sarcastic smile. "I don't think this is true. You look like a prom queen." She chuckled again. "When I asked you to tell Mark to pick out some dresses to try on, I'm sure you didn't think I meant for him to actually wear them. Now, let's hear an explanation, and this better be good," Mia said, crossing her arms. Grace and Laura began to leave the room, but Mia quickly stopped them. "Oh no, nobody's leaving," she said firmly. "I have a feeling everyone will have something to say about this, and I want every detail." Laura and Grace then explained to Mia how their playful jokes with Mark had evolved into a plan to see if he would allow them to dress him up. Mia listened closely, observing Mark's reactions as she did. "Well, Mark, from what I've heard, it doesn't sound like you put up much of a fight," Mia said with a teasing smile. Mark hesitated before answering. "I didn't think I had much of a choice, and everything happened so fast," he said, offering a weak excuse. "Oh my goodness," Laura said, rolling her eyes. "You spent 2 hours getting permed, styled, manicured, powdered, and perfumed. And then you tried on a pretty dress and high heels, and now you say it was all fake. Please," Mia laughed. "Marcy, you need to try again. Admit it, you like being in a dress and heels. You want your hair to be curly so you can play with it and put it up. You want to wear lipstick, nail polish, and all those other cosmetics, don't you?" Mia said this in a loud, teasing, and demanding tone. Mark hesitated, but Mia tapped her foot, waiting for his response. Grace and Laura both watched intently as Mark struggled to find the right words. "For God's sake," Mia continued. "You act like a girl. I don't know any guy who would come over and do my housework in an apron, iron my clothes, do my nails, and even set my hair whenever I ask. What guy does all that, Mark? You're more like a submissive little maid. When we go to the mall together, you act like one of my girly friends." Mark felt a knot form in his stomach as Mia laughed. "I've been meaning to ask you, but I didn't want to scare you off and ruin a good thing." "Ask me? Scare me off? What are you saying?" Mark replied, his voice uncertain. "I guess I like all the attention you give me. You really care. You remind me of the perfect lady's maid," Mia said, her tone softening. "I love how you listen to me talk for hours about guys, dating, and everything else while you brush my hair. I just always had a feeling there was something you weren't telling me." Mark raised his eyes, uncertain of Mia's reaction. Grace smiled. "So, we were right all along," she announced. "Girls, don't be too hard on him," Laura added. I'm sure we can make good use of this new information. We all thought it was true anyway. Marcy, don't worry about it. By the time I'm done with you, you'll have learned how to do everything girly. Mark's eyes widened in protest. What? Please, no. Oh yes, girl, get ready, Mia teased. This will be fun. Mark stood there, looking at himself in the mirror. He had to admit, he looked beautiful. He thought to himself, well, the ball isn't until a week from now, but at least I have my dress. Mia, noticing his hesitation, said, all we need to do now is find you a date. Mark listened in horror as she continued, that's no problem for me. With just a few phone calls, you'll be good to go. We can go out on double dates now, like real girlfriends. In the meantime, she added, you should probably take off that dress and put on something more suitable. Suitable? Like a cute house dress and an apron? You need to do some chores, remember? Mia said with a smile. Mark mumbled, yes, lowering his eyes. Good, Mia said. I'll look for the right dress and shoes for you. In the meantime, I already know what will help you. I'll see you soon, sweetie. In a flash, Mia was out of the room, laughing as she went. Mark took a deep breath, knowing that things were going to be different now, but not realizing just how much. Mia soon returned with a black sleeveless chemise dress adorned with pink rose petals and a pair of black stiletto heels, 3 inches high. Mia handed Mark the black purse with a long strap and said, try it on. Mark did as instructed, slipping into the heels. Mia looked at him and smiled, it's perfect, you look like a cute little housewife. Oh Grace, before you start, there are a few things you need to pick up, Mia said, handing him the purse. Mark, still in shock, asked, what do you mean? I mean go down the street to the store and buy some perfume, nail polish, makeup, lipstick, hairpins, and barrette. We need to pin your hair up a bit while you do your housework, and you'll need the rest for this weekend, Mia explained. But don't you have all of that here? Mark asked, confused. Yes, silly, but now you need your own, Mia said with a playful smile, enjoying Mark's discomfort. I've made a list of things for you to get, and there's some money in your purse. Now go along like a good girl. Mia led him to the door and gently pushed him outside. Mark took a deep breath as he walked down the steps and onto the sidewalk. Realizing he had no choice, he decided to head back to the corner store he had just visited a few hours earlier. The heels clicked on the sidewalk as he walked. He made it to the store in about 10 minutes without issue, grabbed a basket, and started shopping. After finding everything on the list, he finally made his way to the checkout. As he stood in line, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Sorry, miss, a voice said. Mark turned around and was taken aback. A handsome young man stood before him. Mia thought you might need help carrying some things back, he said. Shocked, Mark shifted his weight to one heel and tucked his hair behind his ear with a smile. Yes, he thought to himself, things will definitely be different from now on. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for more content and early access to videos on YouTube.